Hello, everyone. We're in the midst of week 7. Next week, we got week 8, which is going to be a short week. So got that to look forward to. Just a quick reminder that we do have deliverable number 2 for your data analysis project that's due at the end of week 9. Again, just wanted to keep that on your at your attention so that you don't wait till the last minute to do that. I'm not saying that you should work on that over break. I'm just saying that you should make sure that you don't wait until the last minute to do that, as there's more that I'm asking for you from the next part of this assignment. So you will need to keep that up. So please make sure you're aware of that and staying up on that. As far as today goes, we're going to be talking about basically kind of our first phase of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is always one of those fun topics, and I added NIST to the mix to make it less fun. Okay, that was the goal here, is to actually reduce the amount of fun that we have in this class, because it can only be fun is a zero-sum game, and I want to have it all. And that's actually not true. So this is actually a big part of the ISC section. I always get the initials messed up. ISC section on the CPA exam. So if anybody is planning on looking at that, this is just kind of an introduction to some concepts there. Now, the question is going to come up: if we talk about this in this course, does that mean that you're ready to sit for the ISC section and we'll have all this detail already? Answer is no. You still should study using Becker and make sure you're prepared for that section. But I do want to do this as an introduction, not just because of ISC, but also because cybersecurity is such a prominent topic. We're going to be talking about cybersecurity over a 3-week period. It does affect multiple areas of this course in different aspects. So there are also other areas that we're going to be discussing. Between that and AI, they're going to represent 2 of our more emerging technologies or emerging issues areas. So that's why we're talking about this. But yeah, admittedly, today is a little bit dry. The good news is next week, step up a little bit, and then we get to talk about target in week 9, which that'll be fun. It's always fun to explore cases. So today, let's go ahead and examine the NIST's cybersecurity site. So what does NIST stand for? What is that again, Kyle?
National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Very good, very good. Yeah, it's definitely the game. And you like how I just call you out like that? Yeah. So National Institute of Standards and Technologies, this is a governmental agency. They actually have a lot wider array of interest than just cybersecurity, but this is one of their prominent areas that they're very well known and well regarded regarding. The privacy framework that we looked at last week is actually a subset of the cybersecurity framework we're looking at this week. And so we're going to make some comparisons and see if we can understand what exactly is the difference between the cybersecurity framework and the privacy framework, and why is that important? Why is that relevant? So I wanted you to do look at some information. And I noticed when I was looking at the questions this morning preparing for class that I said the overview section. I mentioned this already, but they have changed the format. This section right here actually used to have a title that said overview on it. And so I realized, oh, that's a little bit misleading now because there's no overview section per se. But what was the area that I was talking about? And specifically, I wanted you to look at priority areas that we're talking about down here in this paragraph. So the question actually says, what are the priority areas with NIST respect to cybersecurity? And this is important because we're going to compare this to what they've listed out in their brief a little bit later on. So they talked about cryptography, education workforce, emerging technologies, risk management, identity and access measurements, privacy, trustworthy networks, and trustworthy platforms. So some of the things we've talked about before, some of these are kind of new concepts or newer concepts. I would expect us to actually have some insight with respect to risk management, identity access management to some degree. Privacy, we've already talked about before. We're going to talk a little bit more about emerging technologies as we move forward to the end of the course. There's also this thing called cryptography. Is everybody familiar with the concept of cryptography? So first of all, have you heard the term before? Okay. All right. Do you know what the cryptography represents? The cryptography is fascinating because it actually talks about the ways that crypto assets enter circulation. And I'm trying to decide right now, we've actually got a presentation that we're going to be doing on cryptocurrency. It's more about regulation of cryptocurrency, which I think is an important topic. But I recently watched a video that talked about how cryptography works at a very basic level. And I'm thinking about incorporating that as well. I may do that as an optional exercise. It's like a 30-minute video. So my assumption is that some people will find it interesting, some won't. But cryptography is kind of fascinating, the fact that there's going to be a lot more concerns about it as crypto assets become more prominent because there's going to be needs for security and make sure that the transition of information it has to relate with how information is stored and transmitted across a blockchain and what the rewards for that are. Which, by the way, in case you're wondering, just as a minimal explanation of this, maintenance of blockchain is actually conducted by miners, and when they actually maintain the blockchain properly, they get cryptocurrency. So that's actually how that cryptography works. That's a very, very easy, very basic simplification of the process. The explanation of it is a lot more detailed, but that's kind of one of the concerns of the areas as we start seeing blockchains become more integrated with traditional systems. We'll see the need for security in that area become more prominent. So yeah, hopefully you identified that. And then I had to actually completely rewrite this next question because it completely changed since what happened since I created these activities a little ago. So I basically had you go to the Applied Security Division site. So let's go ahead and go to the Cybersecurity Division site. And had you go over to the projects and programs and look at what the items are, okay? Now, I could call somebody out here, but the simple truth is you all can see what's on the screen right now, and hopefully you have it in front of you. And you've answered the question, so triple whammy. So what are some areas that we're talking about? Well, some of the things, again, fairly intuitive. Privacy frameworks, cybersecurity framework. They've actually got something called the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, the NCCOE. And then they've got something called NIST, which they don't even explain what NIST is. They just say NICE, okay? If we look on that, it's actually, oops, where is that? I remember looking at this and finding what the explanation is. Well, okay, whatever it stands for. The vision of NICE, I know what it stands for, but see, hold on, NICE framework. National Institute of, I heard somebody say it. Cybersecurity, or just cybersecurity or cybersecurity education? What's that?
I have National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education.
Good, okay. National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. All right, so yeah, I know I wasted a lot of time talking about that when it seems irrelevant, but I might have asked a quiz question about that, which is why I was trying so hard to find it, because it was a lot easier to find before. I think when I was looking at one of the earlier versions of this, it actually had, it had NICE spelled out, and so it talked about whatever those things are. And so a whole bunch of different areas that we're concerned with. Privacy and cybersecurity, obviously prominent. There's also this thing called the cybersecurity for the Internet of Things, okay? The Internet of Things, which the first time I encountered that term, I was like, Internet of Things, that is such a weird term. What does that mean? And I guess the technical definition when we talk about the Internet of Things, you could expand that term to say these are things that are not traditionally associated with the network connectivity that now are associated with network connectivity. And so one of the prominent ones that's been talked about is people have home security systems or home maintenance systems that are now on the internet. I know that my mother actually has her thermostat set so that she can actually adjust her thermostat using her smartphone. So that's an example of the Internet of Things, which creates some interesting challenges, as we're going to talk about next week, because internet security or security around those is generally lax. And so people can hack into items that are on the network. It's very interesting. I bought a new air filter over I think it was over the summer. Maybe it was a little bit, maybe it was over the spring. I don't remember, but I bought a new air filter for my room. And so it's just kind of a standalone air filter, and it's got an internet connection. My air filter has an internet connection. Now, I put it to you, why do air filters need internet connections? I mean, the air filtration system, you don't wonder, why do I have to connect that? I have not actually connected to the internet. I'm not sure what would happen if somebody hacked into my air filter. It's like, what could they do? They could set the setting a little bit higher, okay? Or they could turn it off. And either of those I'm actually kind of fine with. But why risk it? Why risk the hacking? I can only imagine that there's probably some sort of compartment inside the air filter that can release harmful gas into the atmosphere if it was hacked properly. That's the doomsday scenario that I have for me. Anyway, the Internet of Things, cybersecurity, obviously very important, especially as we started connecting more and more items to the internet. We're starting to see smart devices all over the place, smart refrigerators, smart appliances within the kitchen, smart appliances in other parts of the house. Obviously, a lot of devices that are kind of computerized now are connected. So some concerns about those items as they move forward. All right. Let's go on. Question 3. So according to the NIST CSF 2.0 guide, what are the 6 functional areas of the cybersecurity framework? Again, I'm going to tackle this question on my own, simply because if we go to the very first page, the 6 items are listed right there. And I didn't ask you to define them. I just wanted you to list them right there. So you can see we got govern kind of at the all-encompassing level. Then we got identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, which again, I hate to be redundant, but this sounds very, very similar to other frameworks that we've talked about before. But we're not going to get into that just yet because we're going to define each of these points. And then we're going to compare this to the privacy framework because I think that that's a valuable comparison to understand the difference between the privacy framework and the cybersecurity framework and what they intend to accomplish. But those are the easy questions, and those are the ones that I have you all answer individually. So now I'm going to rely on your expertise and your research and your knowledge to answer the rest of these questions. So under cybersecurity topics on the cybersecurity side, I want you to click on cybersecurity measurement, and it talks about the NIST Performance Measurement Guide for Information Security Measurement Initiative. What are the challenges in trying to inherent try to quantify the value of cybersecurity programs, and does this initiative address those concerns? So basically, we're going here and we're talking about the initiative. This started in late November of 2022, or mid-November 2022, and it's kind of been ongoing. And interestingly enough, for something that they're really wanting commentary on, it's really, really hard to actually find the initiative itself, because I started out and I was looking at this and I was saying, all right, where's the initiative? And then I was looking over here and it's like, okay, click on this right here. And then you actually have to get over here. You have to like click 3 times to get to the actual initiative itself to find the guide, which for a document's not that bad. It's only 41 pages. And if you found that on your own, great, because this is actually inherent to the question. But we could probably answer the question at a very basic level. So talking about the nature of measurement, and the first question is pretty self-contained because we could have answered this question without really even looking at anything. In your opinion, what are the challenges inherent trying to quantify the value of cybersecurity programs? I'm going to start right in the middle. So I'm going to start with John. What does your group say on this one?
We said that basically you don't visibly see like cybersecurity, like until something bad happens.
Right. Okay.
So, like once a breach happens, you're thankful for having security, and it can be difficult to measure how important cybersecurity is.
Yeah. And so that's something that's alluded to in this. They're saying that we need some ways, some concrete ways of measuring cybersecurity initiatives within an organization and being able to quantify their value. Now, why is this important? So go back to something that you've talked about in other courses. One of the fundamental constraints of any type of accounting information has to do with the cost constraint. So the cost of any providing information cannot exceed the benefit of providing that detail. That is something that I think we as humans are pretty naturally acclimated to. But even if we don't think about it from a human perspective, that's something that we've talked about in other courses. Like if you think about it, you do have that kind of economic consideration the way that you operate. If you go into the grocery store and you're going to buy something, you're going to determine, okay, is the value that I get from this greater than the value that I have to spend to purchase it? Like if you hate bananas, you're not going to go spending money on bananas, even though bananas are relatively cheap. If you hate it, that's like negative utility. Whereas you may love cheeseburgers. I don't know anybody in the room who that applies to. Okay, you may love cheeseburgers, but if hamburger meat is like abnormally expensive, you may just say, all right, I'm just going to do with a grilled cheese sandwich. All right, so that's kind of a contract that we write with ourselves. We operate on, and so we need to actually be able to quantify information. So they talk about a need for the quantification of information in this. And if you go into the little detail on here, they reiterate that point throughout the guide. Now, add face value. I didn't ask you to go into the guide. I just wanted you to look at the front matter, the stuff that they provide in the detail here. I asked you, does this initiative address those concerns? Just looking at what they provide for the initiative. So, Colin, what did your group conclude on that?
The initiative addresses these concerns by not trying to assign a value based on how the program would work within an organization, but the ability to program value.
Okay, so it doesn't try to assign any values. It basically puts that onus on the firms itself. That sounds very familiar to basically everything else we've ever talked in about accounting. We've got a lot of legislators who say this is really, really important. We're not going to give you specific guidance on this, but we'll give you general guidance. And interestingly enough, if you actually delve down into this and you start looking at this, it starts on page 16. 16 on this numbering system right here. Oops, a little bit further on. This is the life that I lead. When I'm at home, I'm just kind of like, I just look at documents here and I find information about how to answer questions about the NIST framework. So it talks about selecting and prioritizing measures and goes into a little bit different detail of identification. I will save you some time instead of having to go through and read this. I'm just going to tell you basically what it says. It says this is going to be different on an organization by organization basis based on what their risks they face, kind of as Colin alluded to, risks that they face and their environment that they operate in. So it's not one size fits all approach. That sounds very, very similar to things that we've done before. The one thing that really jumps out to me is, remember we talked about in 417, we talked about the application of materiality, and the PCAOB has guidelines saying that organizations auditors have to determine materiality for a financial statement audit, but they don't give any specific criteria about how to assign materiality. It's basically done on an organization by organization basis. That was really unsatisfying for me, and this is kind of unsatisfying for me too, because I want to know if I'm to make a quantitative decision, what are the specific quantitative characteristics I'm looking for? Now, to their credit, okay, this is an initiative. This is not an actual bill. This is something that's not been put into implementation yet. They are asking for feedback on this and asking for best practices. So this may actually spur people, cybersecurity experts who are actually in profession, to come through and say, here's how we approach this particular problem in our organization to maybe actually develop best practices in this area. But think about this. Think that you're let's assume that you're sitting at home and you suddenly get a application and they say, we'd like you to come join us as a cybersecurity professional. Be like, well, I'm an accounting major. I'm not really a cybersecurity professional. They say, we're going to pay you 6 figures right out of the gate. You're like, okay, I'm a cybersecurity professional. All right. So they're just really impressed that you actually talked about cybersecurity in your advanced AIS class. And Dr. Barnes was talking you up in a recommendation. You don't know how your application got out there otherwise. So what would be the very first thing that you would want to do? You'd want to say, all right, how do I quantify this so that we can actually implement future cybersecurity measures? We can actually implement these controls, these necessary risk addressing features within the organization. And you call me up and say, Dr. Barnes, how do I do this? I don't know. There's no established guidelines. There's only just general guidance in here. Would that be unsatisfying to you as somebody who's brand new in that organization? I would be pretty unsatisfied in that situation because I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know exactly how to approach this particular question. Moreover, if you don't have a good criteria for how to actually measure what this information is or what the measure of the cost versus the benefit are, what is the likelihood of your new organization that's paying you all this money to do this job accepting your recommendations? You say, I think that we should have a strong cybersecurity infrastructure and we need to implement this policy framework and it's going to cost $3 million to implement. Says, okay, what is the expected benefit? I don't know. We feel good about ourselves in the morning. What is your boss going to say to that? Says, well, I do like feeling good about myself in the morning. Let's go for it. Okay. Probably going to say, all right, you can't quantify the benefits. You can only quantify the cost. That doesn't seem to be something that I really am going to be interested in. Okay. So quantification of benefits and costs, really, really important. And again, that's kind of a very basic guideline that we talk about in accounting in general, but it's extremely important with this perspective too. All right, moving on. AJ, I saw you shaking your head when I asked that question. Did you have a different opinion or were you just kind of like, this is a tragedy?
Well, I thought I was shaking my head whenever you asked if you would be happy.
Oh, okay, all right. I was just making sure. Okay, just making sure. I wasn't going to mention it, but it was just really, really bothering me. So yeah. But let me ask you this: Do you feel good when you wake up in the morning? Is like that important? Okay, that's good. All right. So I want you to open the Cybersecurity Vitals actually on the brief link. Okay. So basically, this is this one right here. So the vitals, and actually I had some information here. So how does this compare to the priority areas that you listed before? Holden, what does your group identify here?
You said practical solutions and then things, industrial control systems, not including question 1. You said that they're probably important, but they're not top priority.
Yeah. So practical solutions, I think, is probably obvious why they'd included in there, because practical solutions just seems like a very general statement. Okay. And it's something that you can include in just any context and it'd be correct. Cryptography and risk management, Internet of Things, those are all very big priority areas because we've identified those in other areas. Then industrial control systems here. Now, without going into detail, why is this something that's relevant and important? This kind of goes back to the Internet of Things. if you think about how manufacturing and traditional manufacturing systems worked before, there's not a lot of integration with accounting information systems or information systems of any degree. Think about it like a machine that manufactures automobile parts, okay? There's probably some sort of computerization, but it's not connected to the information system of the organization. That will likely change in the future. There will probably be integration between manufacturing and integration between information systems so there can actually be monitoring of that progress. That being said, if that's the exposure, if there's going to be computerization and connection to the network, that means that they're vulnerable to that particular, those systems are particularly vulnerable. So when we talk about industrial control systems, that's obviously going to be with respect to controls over these types of systems that are in place over industrial manufacturing and industrial operations, which is not something we can kind of think about. We think about controls at a accounting level, at a financial level. We don't think about them at an operational level. But is it important that we actually have controls at operational levels? Should a factory have controls in place? Okay, I would hope so. I would hope so. It'd be very, very awkward if I, as the accountant, walked down to the factory to do some brief inspections. It's like, oh, controls, we don't bother with those down here. Okay, watch your head. Like, yeah, you put a hard hat on, that's basically a control. We don't think about that from a reporting control, but it's definitely an operational control. And these controls are starting to become a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? They're becoming a lot more streamlined with the controls that we've talked about within accounting information systems as well, because we tend to think of those as operating from a reporting framework, operating from a financial perspective, and then reporting frameworks. But again, the integration of these systems together as we start to streamline these processes, they're going to be more entangled with one another, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So I think that's why this was included on here. That's speculation. I'll be honest. I didn't do a lot of digging on this, but that was my first inclination when I looked at industrial control systems. That being said, for the most part, I think we can say that these are consistent with the one priority areas that were identified. But this is interesting because if you notice, this fact sheet, it talks about this was written in November 9th, 2021, which is about 3 years ago. And so we've had a lot of changes in kind of the risk environment that we've approached here. So I kind of challenged you on this one. This was a little bit more speculation. And so the specific question, just for reference, is going to be, it represents the current cybersecurity priority list for NIST. The fact sheet in question 4 was published in November 2021. Do you feel that these board topics are more priority now than they were in 2021 or less of a priority? So Megan, I'm going to give you the hard question, okay? Which ones do you think are more of a priority than they were back in 2021?
Do you think cryptography and practical solutions are slightly more important?
Okay.
Both cryptocurrency and practical solutions, because it's important with the growth of AI that we have security and best practices for those.
Right. I would agree with that. I think possibly so. Cryptography for sure, because as we start to see more growth in crypto assets and use of crypto assets, that's just inevitable. This is kind of an interesting discussion, and probably one that I will reiterate when we talk about cryptocurrency. I've always kind of been one of those cryptocurrency detractors saying it's good for a means of exchange, but it's never going to be one of those things that's going to represent more than that. I think I have to backpedal on that statement now because it's just something that's become a lot more prominent, a lot more important with respect to technology and its operations in our environment. So cryptography is definitely going to be one of those big areas. Practical solutions, certainly that will always become more prominent over time. I also think if we talk about the Internet of Things, that's something that will become increasingly more prominent over time as we start to see more integration of network technology in everyday devices. There are some devices that I kind of hope never have network technology. I'm going to be really, really off-put if like suddenly I buy a chair for my office and that's connected to the internet. It's like, okay, he appears to be uncomfortable. Let's adjust the chair by 3 degrees. So he says, Enterprise is like, that's just going to be weird. It's going to be weird. I can do that manually. Yeah. So the more simple question is, and AJ, I'm giving you a simple question. This is my apology for calling you out earlier. Okay. Are any of them less of a priority?
No, we said that they're all pretty much a priority.
And I would agree with that statement. I think that this fact sheet has not changed. There may be a need for expansion of new issues or an expansion of the importance and prominence of other issues, but I don't think anything that's listed on here has become less of an issue over time. I think if anything, they're only just increasing in prominence. They're only increasing in importance. All right. So Using the NIST CSF 2.0 guide, briefly define each of the 6 functional areas that you identified in question 3. So I could make you all define all these. I could just basically go through and say, what was your definition for this? The simple truth is that if we actually scroll down a little bit, I know it's here. These are all defined in each of these points. So you can starting here, you can see govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Okay. So just let's go ahead and briefly talk about these real quick. So governing, organization cybersecurity risk management strategies and policies are established, communicated, and monitored. All right, this sure sounds like tone at the top to me. I think we can kind of consider this to be similar to a governance mechanism, because he used the term governance. Or if we want to use our COSO analogy, we can say this is kind of the tone at the top. This is a control environment. Identify organizations risks are understood. Okay, so this is like risk assessment, the COSO framework. Protect, safeguards, management, the organization cybersecurity risks are used. Detect, cybersecurity attacks are compromises are found and analyzed. Respond, detect when regarding detect action, cybersecurity incident are taken, and assets recover, assets and operations are affected by cybersecurity incident are restored. Now, this is interesting because I kind of use the first two as examples from the COSO framework. So I think we can say this is probably very similar to control environment. Identify as similar to risk assessment. But then we start talking about protect, detect, respond, and recover. All right. What are the 2 general categories of controls that we've talked about in previous courses? Okay. Controls are either designed to blank a material misstatement or to blank a material statement and then subsequently blank it. Blank is awful. I can't really come up with the word. So I'm just going to answer the question because I really asked that. I butchered that question right there. Okay. So prevent and then detect and correct. Okay. 2 basic categories. Control should either be preventative or they should be detective in nature. And then presumably if they're detective, they have corresponding corrective elements. If we look at these, this guideline, protection kind of encompasses that idea of protection or prevention. Protection is saying that we're trying to implement systems or trying to implement measures that are going to protect the system from from any cybersecurity issues. We're trying to safeguard them against cybersecurity risks. That being said, we already know that preventative controls cannot be 100% effective. It's just not practical for us to think that way. So there do need to be redundant controls, which was how we think of detective controls. So we actually have the word detect up here. Okay, we actually have the word detect. So if there are cybersecurity attacks, we make sure we find them and analyze them. And then we got respond and recover. Those sure sound like good terms to describe what would happen in the correction process. Okay. Respond, and then any compromised systems, we recover those systems. So that's a very simple way to think about it. It's something we've already familiar with is the controls types. We got one aspect that deals with the prevention, and then other aspects, 3 of the aspects that deal with prevention and detection, detection and correction. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and talk about the 5 functional areas of the privacy framework. So these are the areas we talked about, and I brought up this particular image. This is something I found online. I can't take credit for this, you know. I mean, this is a sweet picture, but I did not create this one. Okay, I did not create this one. I found this online. And so I do want to talk very quickly, very briefly about this because there are a few things that are left out. So it says NIST CSF 5 domains. How many domains does the CSF actually have? 6. So let's go ahead. Olivia, this is not the question, but I'm going to call you out. Okay. What's missing from the CSF?
Govern.
Yeah, governance. Okay. So we can kind of think that governance is kind of encompassing all this. Okay. Gold star for you. Yeah, you were prepared for a question that I didn't ask you to prepare for. So anyway, then we have the core frameworks, and these are what we talked about last week. Okay, and you will notice that this time they were correctly specified with the letter P afterwards, even though Kyle left them out last time. Okay, shame on you, Kyle, not completing the full question. All right, so then the question comes up. Which functions are common to the 2 frameworks? And this is a pretty easy question to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I've still got 2 people to call upon. I called upon you first, Olivia. I'm going to call upon you again because you answered that question so well. I was so impressed. I want you to do this one. Which are common to the 2 frameworks?
Govern, identify, and protect.
Good. Okay. And Jenna, which ones are different between the 2 frameworks?
Recover.
Okay. So detect, respond, and recover, and you'll notice that they've got control and communicate in the privacy framework that kind of allude to that. Which leads to a very interesting point, okay? Why do we have a separation between these two? Why do you think that there's a separation between those two? So again, if we think about this cybersecurity framework, that appears to be fairly holistic with respect to how we think about controls or how we think about a control environment. It's going to address the overall environment, which admittedly the privacy framework does that too. It has a govern mechanism. Okay. There is an assessment point. They both have identification. But then we start talking about the nature of controls. Remember, we said that we're going to have controls that prevent the statements from occurring. And we're going to have controls that detect and correct the statements when they take place. All right. And that's kind of the same idea of the cybersecurity framework. Cybersecurity framework has a mechanism for that as well. Obviously, we're not talking about misstatements in that scenario. We're talking about cybersecurity incidents, but it's the same idea, is that we protect against cybersecurity attacks, or if cybersecurity attack does happen, then we detect it, respond, and recover. Same concept. The only one that's actually listed in the privacy framework is protection, all right? What does that imply about the privacy framework? Is privacy framework primarily preventative, or is it detective and corrective? I'm not asking anybody specifically on this one. This one's a toss-up question. First person to answer gets the points. Okay. So who said that? Okay, you said the holder. Okay, you get the points. Okay, 1 million points. Okay, it's not grade points, not points in the class, but just 1 million points for using in the points parlor redemption. Okay, so 1 million points. You all missed out on 1 million points. Okay, you all missed out on 1 million points. Next question's worth 2 million points. All right. I'm going off the deep end. Sorry, guys. All right. So yeah, preventative. Okay. We're talking about prevention, which is that consistent with how we would view privacy? Is that how you would want privacy to be viewed in your organization? So if we talk about how privacy works, think about how your interactions with any kind of organization or any kind of company or any kind of platform where you're sharing confidential information. You don't want that confirmation to be compromised and then say, oh, we didn't protect your information from the get-go, but here's a coupon to Target to make sure that you still stay a good consumer. You don't want this to be fixed after the fact. You want this to be fixed before anything happens, right? Now, again, privacy framework is not going to be fully complete. We're not going to actually be able to prevent bad things from happening. But that being said, the focus is very obviously in the privacy framework on stopping bad things from happening from the beginning. Is this consistent with what we talked about with respect to the measurement issue earlier on? Because remember, the privacy framework is a subset of the cybersecurity framework. So we're not talking about two separate things. These are related to one another. Is this consistent with what we talked about measurement? The answer is yes. Okay. If we can't quantify cybersecurity initiatives effectively, then we can't implement proper cybersecurity initiatives, meaning that our protection mechanisms, our prevention mechanisms are not going to be as robust and they're not going to be as helpful. So there's a really, really strong argument for being able to quantify these measurement criteria. Now, the good news is the people that you go and work for, they're going to be a lot more intelligent than just people who say, well, I can't observe, I can't see something, so I'm going to ignore it. They are going to recognize the cost associated with this. That being said, it's still probably important to understand how we quantify these costs after the fact so we can look forward and we can actually have meaningful observations moving forward. That being said, that's something that we're going to be doing on another day. We're going to talk about those over the next 2 weeks. And hopefully, at that point, we start understanding how we should take this seriously and how we should actually be more advocates for strong cybersecurity in organizations moving forward. All right, this is a bit of a short lecture, but I'm sure that nobody in this room will complain. If you do have complaints, you can issue them, hold them. That's the reason I gave them the points, okay? All right, so I will see you all on Friday for our next quiz. And I guess we're starting Alteryx on Friday. Is that right? Okay, cool.